Anyway, your movie this week is called Manhunt in Space. But first, a little kinescope suppository from our video depository. It's an old general hospital.
This time, we watch Season 4, Episode 13, Manhunt in Space.
In which a young man named Winky rides his best bud Rocky's rocket up into the sky looking for the gay nightlife.
Woo! And with the short, General Hospital. But first, some follow-up.
Hey! This is not a good place to go for your MST3K news because we take our time recording and editing this, and it's not coming out every week and all this and all that and all the other, which is to say there's a fundraiser out there for season 14, and it's been out there for a few weeks.
But it's going to be out there for a couple weeks more. So it's not a bad thing for you to be hearing about this now because they're going to be continuing this fundraiser all the way through America's Thanksgiving. So if you haven't yet joined the fundraiser for a season 14, you should check out the link in the show notes to find out more and perhaps donate some dollars yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have.
And I have.
It's a little hard to say at this point how successful this fundraising campaign is going to be, but, there's still plenty of time left. And they announced that they're going to be doing a big event at the end of this fundraising cycle, which is to say, a Turkey Day Marathon.
Woohoo! I so enjoyed the Turkey Day marathons of the past, so this is an exciting announcement.
A 48-hour Turkey Day Marathon.
Oh, you got to double your pleasure, Chris, right? I'll be there with my double mint gum. Not a sponsor, but contact us.
I guess.
I mean, does it still exist? I don't even know. I would be my own twin in order to have them as a sponsor. It'd be fine.
Anyway, yeah, 48 hours. They've picked out a bunch of shows, it looks like, from the clips that they're going to be including a lot of season 13 episodes.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to be a good way for them to give a nice flavor for what season 14 is going to be, because it's going to continue to have, or we expect it's going to continue to have, Jonah, Emily, and Joel all back as hosts. Obviously, they couldn't say for sure while the strike was going on, but there was every indication they were going to invite them back.
All right, so you can go to mst3kturkeyday.com to find out more, and you can just go to mst3k.com to find out about giving them money, and you can go to patreon.com/it's just a show if you want to find out how to give us money. That's a lot of money to give out to people, though.
It's so true, but it's the Christmas season, so, it's giving season.
It's not even Thanksgiving yet.
I know. Oh, but it's so close. It's so close.
Well, that's our big news this time around. So let's gobble, gobble, gobble and get on to today's episode, Manhunt in Space with the Church General Hospital and all that fun stuff.
Okay.
This time we watched Season 4, Episode 13, Manhunt in Space.
But first, a short. General Hospital. Well, Nurse Jessie and her husband, Dr. Brewer, that is Dr. Phil Brewer, didn't come to work together this morning, even though their shifts start at the same time. And isn't that interesting? They've invited Cynthia and Ken Martin to dinner to celebrate their engagement, but it just doesn't seem like Dr. Phil is all that excited about it. I mean, if it makes the engagement official in some sort of way, why would that be a bad thing? And yet he seems so unhappy. Isn't that interesting? Dr. Hardy comes in to pick up a patient's x-rays, but before continuing to the patient, he says, "Hello, Jessie," to Nurse Jessie, even though he hasn't said hello to anyone else in the room, and certainly none of them by name. Isn't that interesting? Dr. Hardy diagnoses patient Mrs. Martha Lyons with a hiatus hernia, and she's worried because her husband, Dr. George Lyons didn't diagnose her correctly and dismissed her symptoms. He's going to be so angry because Dr. Hardy's the one who diagnosed her. Professional rivalry much? Or perhaps it's more of a personal rivalry. Anyway, she'll be in the hospital for a couple weeks under Dr. Hardy's constant care. And isn't that interesting? To be continued.
And now for our feature presentation, Manhunt in Space. Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, and his slutty sidekick Winky are on a new space case. Several spaceships filled with space supplies are being stolen by space pirates en route to the space planet Casa 7. The space pirates are led by space baddie Rinkman, who is working for Space Queen Cleolanta of the space planet Ophiuchus. I'm not entirely sure what her space plan is, but it's surely dastardly. Rocky's going to need all the help he can get, I guess. Professor Newton has been working on a gadget that should help. You know how in the desert the heat causes you to see things that aren't there? Well, it only makes sense that the extreme cold should hide things that are there. So he's invented cold light as an invisibility cloaking device. Now the ship can sneak around invisibly, and the production department's job just got a little bit easier. There is, of course, all the usual space antics. Rocky's friend Vina gets captured by space pirates, but Rocky helps her escape. Rocky and Winky sneak invisibly onto the pirate planet of Pra, but they escape. Rocky gets tied up by a double agent at his space base, but he escapes. Finally, the double agent attempts to escape arrest, but only Rocky and Winky are allowed to escape in this film, so it's off to space jail for the double agent, and finally, Winky has a chance to go through his little black book and enjoy the gay nightlife once more. The end, except it's totally not, because very few of these threads have been tied up, so I guess there's going to be a sequel. But for now, the end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, Joel looks forward to seeing another black and white feature, since it shows the gritty despair of real life, but Crow wants color! This leads to a major revelation. Tom's colorblind. Everything he sees is red, 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 but not in a murderous sort of way. The Mads bring us an invention exchange of beanbag pants, which look like vinyl pants with big bean butts attached. Though, if they're meeting with friends and discussing like Jean-Paul Sartre over wine and cheese, beanbags attached to one's bottom seems a little out of place. No matter, the Mads sit on the attached beanbag bottoms and begin discussion, then send the movie to the Satellite of Love. At movie break, Cambot breaks out the organ as an SOL production of General Hospital is made. Crow is a blonde female patient as Tom, Dr. Chad Feelgood, is diagnosing and comforting Crow. Nurse GPC bursts in, outraged that Dr. Chad is cheating on her. But you know what? Joel just refuses to participate. He played soap opera too much with his sister back on Earth. With the movie doing so much to prove it's in future space, Joel and the bots can't help but mock the use of space as a modifier for every object and task. If future astronauts eat space lunch, did cowboys of the past eat frontier lunch? Certainly Mrs. Lyons eats hospital lunch, so, scene established. Winky calls to visit the folks on the Satellite of Love from his invisible spaceship. The bots mock him for not only lacking the effective lady moves he thinks he has, but also of not being in an invisible spaceship at all. They call his mom in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, and she opens the door to the basement on the phone and on the view screen. Somehow, even though the gig is up, Winky doubles down on the invisible ship and on being a lady magnet. Maybe you too know someone who firmly adheres to their delusion of self rather than admit to obvious lies. Finally, Joel is playing Crow the guitar hooked up to Tom the amp, so all the guitar shredding is reinterpreted in the melodious voice of Tom Servo. Even when Joel goes all Frampton and uses the golden throat attachment. Back in Deep 13, Frank has so many words about his bougie path in life. But Dr. F, yeah, he's trapped sitting on his beanbag pants, so he has to listen. What do you think, sirs?
Welcome to the wonderful world of Rocky and Winky.
You know, like when you started out with that, I was like, Rocky and Bullwinkle? I like Rocky and Bullwinkle, but Winky is not Bullwinkle. It's totally different.
Yeah, and actually, like, this comes before Rocky and Bullwinkle, but I never thought about that before. I wonder if that was in the back of their heads when they were making Rocky and Bullwinkle, the famous couple of Rocky and Winky.
Yeah, because that moose and squirrel are totally reminding you of like Rocky, the space astronaut who's there to save the day, and Winky, his horny sidekick. Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, basically.
Although I don't think that's the aspect of Winky that they were really pulling in to make Moose Bullwinkle. Perhaps it was the, slightly not smart part.
I don't know. Does Winky come off as not smart? He doesn't have much to do compared with Rocky, but he doesn't seem particularly not smart, much as Joel and the Bots insist that he is.
It's true. Perhaps that's more an impression I have from the riffing than from the actual show. I mean, Winky seems like super excited to like be the driver of a rocket, and like that's cool. And he seems to follow everybody's plans just fine when they're like, we're gonna do this. Winky, go get the rocket ready. And he's like, yep, definitely on it. But there isn't much planning he does. So maybe that's the impression I'm getting that makes him not super smart, because he's not the planner or the instigator in anything.
That's not true. Winky has the independent thought at the end of the movie to cut the power lines effectively of the baddie's spaceship so that they can't fly away and therefore they don't explode. Not that Winky knew that there had been explosive attached, but he does do something independently to prevent the baddies from escaping, which also happens to save their lives. And that was his own plan.
Well, my goodness. Then I'm entirely wrong. There's no connection between Winky and Bullwinkle whatsoever. It's just the Rocky part.
No.
Maybe not.
I think that both Bullwinkle and Winky are the more attractive ones of the pair.
Well, wow. I've never really even thought about who I find more attractive, the squirrel or the moose. And I just don't even know where to go with that thought right now, Chris. Who do you find more attractive? Obviously the moose.
I mean, obviously the baddies, but of the two, yeah, probably the moose.
Boris and Natasha are so much more attractive. You're very right.
Obviously.
I mean, is that true in this movie too? Do you think like Cleolanta and Rinkman are more exciting and attractive than Rocky and Winky? More attractive than Vina?
No, obviously Winky. Look, my favorite thing about this episode is that I find Winky kind of cute.
Aww.
Winky is truly the Perico of his day, okay? He's a very good sidekick. He's easy on the eyes, and he's fun to have around.
But he's not comic relief in the same way that you expect your sidekick to be.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Although he does get a song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess he does. A song that puts people to sleep. Is that his secret power? As a sidekick, the sleepy song?
If there's one thing I know about music in the 50s, it's that they didn't mind occasionally drifting off to it.
I guess so. I have to say, I was sitting there watching that scene and I was like, my goodness, I don't think I've ever fallen asleep to somebody serenading me before.
Not even when you were a kid?
No, not at all. Like if somebody's serenading you, you're like listening, like you're an active member of an audience, a very small audience, granted. But like, I can't imagine falling to sleep to somebody who's sitting there inches away from you, playing an instrument live and singing a cool song. Like, how is that sleep-inducing?
Oh, it wasn't that cool. But, okay, so you never sang lullabies to your kid to help them go to sleep?
No, I mean, we sang well, we didn't really sing lullabies. I have to admit, like, Big in Japan is the song that we would sing to my kid when he was very young to calm him down when he was crying. But we didn't necessarily sing to him while he was falling asleep. And that kid in the thing, he's not a baby.
No.
He's like
12.
Boy genius, right? There's no way that kid is 12.
Yeah, the actor's 12, I believe.
Really? He presents so much younger than 12 to me. he presents as like a genius 9 rather than a genius 12.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a thing that Hollywood tends to like. I see also Winky, right, who has one of those preternatural baby faces, but...
No, it's very true. But I don't think that they're trying to claim that Winky's like 16, you know? Like, I think they're still firmly putting Winky in his low 20s.
No, that's true. But Winky, as we'll get into later, was a child actor as part of the Our Gang series. And I think there they picked out kids who looked a bit young, even for their young ages, so that they could stay in the parts a bit longer.
Yeah, because once kids reach a certain age, they're not, quote unquote, cute anymore. Not cute enough to be a part of that.
Exactly. Anyway, all that to say, did you enjoy this episode and had you seen it before?
I had not seen this episode before, and I enjoyed it very, very much. And actually, one of the things I was thinking about as I was watching it was just how tonally different it was from the episode that we watched before this, the Hobgoblins episode. So what I was thinking as I was watching it was just how much more playful and joyful the riffing and the camaraderie on set was, and how in Hobgoblins there seemed to be more of a kind of mean tone in the way that some of the riffs were delivered. And I certainly like the subject matter, like the movies that they were watching and the eras that they came from could have contributed to that as well. But it just, like, the Joel and the bots seems so playful. And it was just very much contrasted with the way that Mike and the bots interact. I don't know if you had that feeling while you were watching these. It was just a strange impression after watching them back to back.
I mean, not to paint too broad a stroke again, but this is generally why I generally prefer season 4 type episodes to season 9 type episodes, is because they are friendlier to each other and having more delight and joie de vivre instead of being sort of bitter and salty about everything the whole time. Even as somebody who is myself quite bitter and salty a lot of the time, I still really enjoy the pleasant, friendly, let's hang out vibes of the Joel era.
Total. And I do want to just say clearly, I enjoyed both of these episodes. Both episodes, Hobgoblin and the Manhunt in Space, they're both super fun episodes. And the vibe of Mike has to be different than the vibe of Joel, right? They are different hosts that are making a different kind of character when they're on screen. So this is not a knock against Mike and a plug for Joel or anything like that. It's just the tone was so different. And having these episodes side by side just really highlighted that for me. Just the different take that they have on the movies, 5 years after the one that we're watching today. There's one more thing that I wanted to bring up before we move on, Chris.
Okay.
From the General Hospital short. So this is not from the riff. This is from the actual short.
Uh-huh.
There is a conversation that happens between two nurses after the doctor comes in and they're like, "Oh, you didn't come with your wife today, huh?" And he's like, "No, I took a walk before I came in." And they're like, "Oh, isn't marriage interesting?" Right? That was the whole exchange. And the nurse says, "Well, I guess marriage looks differently when you're looking at it from this end of the stethoscope."
Marriage. I guess it's a wonderful but weird institution, eh, Clampett?
I wouldn't know, Miss Moore.
I'm not very bright.
Looking at it from the other end of the stethoscope, neither would I.
And Chris, you don't look through a stethoscope.
Not typically, no.
I can't believe that they let that go. I can't believe General Hospital didn't do enough research to know that a stethoscope is, a thing you listen through, not look through. I can't believe that, Joel and the bots didn't go whoa, wait a second. You don't look through a stethoscope? I don't know. I couldn't get past that line. I was just all right, this soap opera was totally believable for me until this moment.
So, if I didn't show you this episode back in the day, even though I am a big fan of most of this episode and of Winky in particular, it's probably because I never really liked the General Hospital segments very much.
Oh, why wouldn't you like General Hospital? It's full of all of the juicy, juicy interpersonal relationships that we're all so, like, keen to learn more about.
Well, I mean, that's theoretically fun, but I found with the short that I had the same problem that I always had whenever I tried to get into soap operas, which I did a few times when I was younger, which is that I have no idea who any of these people are or what's going on. And they're all alluding to like drama that they're not telling you about.
Oh, it's so true. I do have to say, when I was writing the summary for it, I had to watch just the General Hospital bit like 4 times, because you're right. When you jump in the middle of this, you don't know who anybody is. There's no setup of the characters because it's a continuation of a story that you never have a beginning for and you never have an end of.
Yeah, and I mean, some of this is sort of tropey, right? You're supposed to be able to, I think, just figure out really quickly that the reason that even though Dr. Phil suggested that Cynthia and Ken come over for a celebration of their nuptials, that the reason he actually thinks it's maybe a bad idea is because he was having an affair with Cynthia. Like, you're supposed to be able to tell that from that scene. And like, I guess I was bad at picking that up when I first saw this episode when I was 14 or 15, right?
Or you just didn't care and you were like, seriously, couldn't everybody just be honest about what's going on? Like, their marriage is a sham. We can all see it.
I don't know. I found it very hard to follow, and I found soap operas generally hard to follow for that reason. Did you grow up watching soap operas?
I did. I grew up watching Days of Our Lives.
Ooh, which one's that?
Days of Our Lives was on at 3:00, which was just after I got home from school when I was a kid. So we would be picked up by my grandmother from school, my friend and I and my little sister, and we would all go over to my friend's house because my parents were working and she had a grandma at home. So my grandma would come and pick us up. She would take us over to my friend's house where her grandma was as well. And the two grandmas would be like little biddies talking to each other, right? And then we would sit down and we would watch Days of Our Lives. Days of Our Lives was the one that started out like sands through the hourglass. These are the days of our lives. And then it was crescendo of music. And then you had people walking out and you'd see their faces. And, you know, they'd mug the camera a little bit so you could see the faces of all the main characters. And then they would go right into the drama of the story.
I absolutely remember the opening. And if I ever happened to catch it, I would sit around and let it play out because, like, the little TikTok music in the background, not like TikTok, the streaming service, but it made a little ticking, talking kind of sound in the background of it. And then that amazing announcer voice was just beautiful. And obviously I'll stick around for that.
Yes. And then the people would start being like, oh, Bo and Hope's wedding are coming up. Like, oh, I'm so excited. And, oh, I wonder if so-and-so is going to attend. Oh, they can't possibly attend. That would be so wrong. And the drama continues from there. And then somebody's pregnant and somebody has amnesia. And I mean, I can't even remember how long Days of Our Lives was on, but it was on for decades. So like the grandparents inside of when I watched it in the 80s were like the young people when the show first started, and they were still there, leading their grandparent lives and interacting with their kids and interacting with their grandchildren all the time. And you always had a bad guy. Like, I don't even know why there was a bad guy in a soap opera other than there has to be somebody who's trying to ruin everyone's lives,
Right. You need to have high drama, so.
Yeah. I mean, somebody has to be there trying to impoverish our main characters or, break up marriages or, at least try and make affairs happen. And yes, you have to have drama, as if everyday life isn't like dramatic and okay, I guess nobody wants to see us doing, like home repairs as our episode of Days of Our Lives.
Right.
Nothing creates more drama in a relationship than having to do repairs on your house. And that never came up on the soap opera while I was watching it.
Since we've already gotten letters about this, since you mentioned it, I will say Days of Our Lives is still on.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It's on Peacock now, but it
that
is still...
That means that the people who I watched in the 80s are now the grandparents.
Well, that's possible. I mean, sometimes actors leave a show, but...
It's true. But they'd be referring to them, though, still, or at least their characters, because that was one of the things that the soap opera did. It was a continuation of everybody's stories. So the young people who were on, and by young, I mean like the people who are in their 20s, would be talking about their parents who were characters that people who had watched 20, 30 years ago knew.
Right.
And that's so cool. Like there's something kind of magical about that you could play a character for nearly your whole life.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my mother watched a bit of soap opera stuff, including General Hospital.
Ooh, did she watch General Hospital because she was a nurse, or had she already been indoctrinated?
Good question. Don't have an answer.
Oh, okay.
I think she might have already been indoctrinated, but the fact that she was a nurse probably made it more fun for her as well. I don't know.
She would have caught the stethoscope thing.
I bet she would have, yeah. So when I was about 10 or 11, I got really curious about this genre, and I attempted to write my own soap opera.
You did not?
I didn't go very far. Basically, I tried to plot out the entire town and who everybody was, and I made a big family tree and so forth.
So you started a Gilmore Girls. You made the whole town. You had the parents, the university connections, and everything.
Mm-hmm. There's also a scene in the book Harriet the Spy at the very beginning of it where she's playing a game called Town, where she sets up a little town and imagines everybody in it and what their relationships are. So I was also probably inspired by that. But basically, I didn't understand how people worked in any real way, or where the drama would come from or why they'd care. So I think I defaulted to how many of my early stories from around that time went, and just basically I just kept killing all characters. Because I couldn't think of any other source of conflict or drama.
But you didn't find a way, like Arthur Conan Doyle, to bring your characters back from the dead?
I only made it a few pages into the script, and half the town was gone.
What did you, drop a bomb on this town, Chris?
No. Each page had to have a new person dying. Otherwise, nothing's happening.
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway, a few years later, I finally did sort of get into General Hospital a little bit. One summer when we were sort of staying in Florida, and there was nothing for me to do all day. And I ended up just watching General Hospital.
Were any of the characters from this short still on when you watched it? Do you remember?
Dr. Steve Hardy was probably still on, but I don't remember him. He was not one of the main focus characters, or certainly not one of the ones I was paying attention to.
No, because he was old, right? He wouldn't be the focus. He's not hot anymore.
Yeah, no, it definitely was the young hotties were the interesting ones.
Was this in the 80s and early 90s when everybody had super big hair as well?
It was the early 90s for sure. It probably would have been around the same time this episode came out.
Because that's what I remember from watching Days of Our Lives, was just oh my gosh, her hair is amazing. I can't get my hair to do that. It's so big. I mean, Farrah Fawcett's got nothing on those ladies' big hair. Very big.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 dramatic twists all about today's episode, Manhunt in Space, and a little General Hospital. Go, Charlotte, go!
In today's episode of General Hospital, Martha Lyons is diagnosed with a hiatus hernia. Chances are some of you listening are all too familiar with what a hiatus hernia is. But for the rest of you, a hiatus is a gap, like when a TV show goes on hiatus. Sometimes you can develop a small hiatus in your diaphragm. The muscle that separates your chest and your stomach and helps you breathe.
A hernia, on the other hand, is a kind of bulge, or more specifically, it's when there's pressure on an organ or some fatty tissue, which causes it to bulge through something that it really shouldn't be able to bulge through, like, say, a little hole in your diaphragm.
Yes. So, yeah, a hiatus hernia, also called a hiatal hernia, is when a bit of your stomach bloops through your diaphragm into your chest. And the tricky thing about a hiatal hernia is that, just as the good folks at General Hospital suggested, it can be really hard to diagnose.
You might not feel any symptoms at all. Or you might have any number of symptoms, like, shortness of breath or nausea, which could be symptoms of pretty much anything, or of nothing particularly troubling. And apparently, most people with a hiatal hernia won't need treatment. But sometimes a hiatal hernia can cause more severe problems, and your doctor might have a tricky time diagnosing it.
I don't think we gave out any medical advice just now, but I guess we should underline that we're not doctors. We're not even actors pretending to be doctors. If you want to know more about the wonderful world of hernias, you should talk to your doctor.
At one point in the General Hospital episode, there's an organ swell, and Tom says...
And now taking the ice, your Minnesota North Stars!
In 1992, when this episode came out, the Minnesota North Stars were the local NHL hockey team. But a year later, the team moved to Dallas, Texas. Finding themselves significantly less north, they were renamed the Dallas Stars.
The movie begins with a couple of riffs about salted nut rolls. The associate producer's name inspires Tom to say,
Arthur Pearson, the inventor of the salted nut roll.
The salted nut roll is a nougat and salted peanut confection made by Pearson's Candy of St. Paul, Minnesota, no relation to the associate producer.
And a few seconds later, the movie opens with a shot of a ship approaching space planet Casa 7. And Joel says...
This is the part where the Zagnut is fertilized by the salted nut roll.
Zagnuts are another kind of candy bar, this time peanut butter covered in toasted coconut. Now, I've had a few salted nut rolls in my day, but I don't think I've ever actually tried a Zagnut. Listeners, should I? Write to info@itsjustashow.com and let me know if this should be my new life quest.
I want to talk about more medical stuff. During the soap opera sketch, Crow's playing a patient who wants to know what her diagnosis is and asks,
Is it the heartbreak of psoriasis?
No, it's not that.
Psoriasis is a skin condition that causes skin to grow much faster than normal, leading to bumps that can feel itchy and scaly.
The phrase, the heartbreak of psoriasis, is the stark opening to an old ad for Tegrin, which was sold to treat psoriasis. Tegrin is derived from coal tar, a byproduct of turning coal into coal gas or into coke, and it seems to be effective in treating psoriasis and dandruff. Well, anyway, we're not doctors.
As the orbit jet comes in for a landing, a large piece of scaffolding in the background causes Joel to say,
When in Duluth, visit the lift bridge.
The aerial lift bridge in Duluth, Minnesota was converted into a lift bridge around 1930. Lift bridges are pretty neat. The entire bit that you drive over gets lifted vertically up to allow ships to pass underneath. They're not super common either, but the oldest lift bridge in the USA is the Hawthorne Bridge right here in Portland, Oregon.
Bad guy Rinkman is impressed with some of the tech Rocky Jones is carrying.
We've got something good in that secret of invisibility.
Ralph Ellison wants you.
I think so.
Ralph Ellison is the author of the novel Invisible Man, not to be confused with H.G. Wells' science fiction novel The Invisible Man. Ellison's novel doesn't feature any actual invisibility tech. Instead, it's about the experience of a black man in mid-century America. I talked about it on my other podcast, The Spotter Inn. Link in the show notes.
And finally, Rocky manages to step out of a room just as Rinkman enters it, and Joel quips,
Oh, now it's a Fado farce.
Georges Feydeau was a French playwright who, in the first years of the 20th century, wrote a number of popular farces which involved a lot of mistaken identity and near misses. One of them is called A Flea in Her Ear, which I've never heard of either. What a deep cut, Joel. Good job.
And that's time. So now we move from soap operas to space operas.
I mean, you know, when you say space opera, the image that comes to my head is like a woman dressed as a Viking with a very big voice and the braids, but she also is on another planet, and it's like Valhalla or something.
So wait, what comes to your mind when you hear the phrase soap opera?
I mean, I watch soap operas, so the hourglass at the beginning of Days of Our Lives is totally what comes to my mind when I think soap opera. But somehow space opera, I'm putting opera in space rather than putting opera in the bathroom when I do soap opera. I don't know, it's just different.
Usually space operas refer to sort of big melodramatic space adventures, often with space war and maybe space romance. So like Star Wars is a space opera.
Huh.
And I don't know, Dune is a space opera, I guess.
Oh, I guess, yeah.
There's a whole, Flash Gordon is a space opera. Like there's a whole wide spread of what counts as a space opera.
So it's opera in the sense of the large drama that's unfolding, as opposed to the singing and music part of opera, which is what my visual place was imagining.
Exactly. It comes from terms like soap operas and horse operas, which was a term for westerns.
Okay, wow. How different would I have thought about westerns if people referred to them as horse operas?
I mean...
Wow.
If they leaned into it, it could be great. We've talked a little bit about some of the serials before, about the Flash Gordon serials and so forth. But like this is, I don't know if you caught on to this. This was originally a TV show.
Yes. It felt very episodic through the entire thing. It didn't feel like a long TV show either. Like, these were not hour-long episodes of the TV show like some of the other TV shows made into movies that MST3K has pulled up before, where it was like 2 episodes that came to make one MST3K. This felt like there were 4 or 5.
3. It was 3.
3! That's still a lot!
It's still a bit. The show was called Rocky Jones Space Ranger, and it was on from 1954 to 1955 for just a little while there. It has a bit of a reputation, I guess, as being pretty good.
Again, like most soap operas, I feel like I got dropped in the middle of it. But I think they did a really good job of introducing the characters in the sense that when Rinkman comes on, like Vina is like immediately saying, Rinkman, oh, I can't believe you've stooped so low, right? So she's immediately establishing this as the bad guy, and calling him a space pirate so that we know what his entire motivation is going to be. And in the General Hospital episode, by contrast, the doctor comes in and it's just like, oh, you didn't come to work with your wife. No, I took a walk.
Yeah, I think Rocky Jones did a good job of introducing itself on each episode. I've watched a few of the episodes that were not turned into MST3K movies, and they are very much the same, but they do have a bit of that flavor. I don't know. We have them, which is nice because they were all shot on film, which is unusual, but it means that they weren't deleted like a lot of the other early space TV shows were, because there were a couple of them in the early days of television. And I want to tell you some of the names of them.
Ooh, okay.
So the very first TV space serial adventure show was called Captain Video and his Video Rangers.
What year would this have come out? What would they have understood video as?
I think they had a vague idea of what video was on a television, I suppose.
Okay.
But it was on the Dumont network, which lets you know just how old it was, from 1949 to 1954.
My gosh.
They put out over 1,500 episodes of it, it would appear. And we have about 24 today because so many of the tapes got destroyed, as was the habit of the time. But I don't know, it was a popular show, and they sold lots of fun things like you would have gotten in the radio shows, such as secret decoder rings and whatnot, and ray guns and goggles that you could buy, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. By Ovaltine.
Yeah, exactly. So it seems to have been pretty popular, and we do have a few little examples of it, which I haven't watched, but there you go.
Do they have the same kind of setup like this, where you have a man who's in charge, and he's got a sidekick who's with him, and there's a lady friend, and they're, that sort of thing? Do we still have that kind of setup?
You know what? I don't know whether there was a female cast member on Captain Video and his Video Rangers, though there was a role for Ernest Borgnine.
Oh.
So that's nice.
Okay, well, that's awesome.
There were, however, female friends on several of the other shows, including Tom Corbett, Space Cadet.
Ooh, okay. But now so Space Cadet to me suggests that there's some sort of like learning atmosphere.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
As opposed to,
Space Professional.
Space Professional or like Space General or Space Ranger. Like that just seems to outrank Space Cadet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, they are cadets at the Space Academy in this one as they're training to become members of the Solar Guard, I'm being told.
Oh.
So there you go. Another show was called Space Patrol.
Oh, and that just makes me think of Rat Patrol. I don't know why.
Sure.
But Space Patrol, super good. So like cops in space?
Yes. As far as I can understand, very much cops in space.
Nice. Cops in space.
There was also, there's a quick Buck Rogers that didn't last very long, but there was actually a show called Captain Zero, Z-RO.
Oh.
Which was originally specific to San Francisco before it went national a few years later.
Wow. How was it specific to San Francisco?
It was a local show from KRON TV in San Francisco and eventually KTTV in Los Angeles.
Nice.
And then eventually became syndicated before it came to an end in 1955, as did many of the other shows, including Rod Brown of the Rocket Rangers and Rocky Jones Space Rangers. By the end of 1955, all of these shows ended. Most of them ended in 1954 or 1955. They were all gone.
Why?
Because Westerns became popular.
Oh. Okay, so they didn't make a space Western in the same way that, like, Serenity was, or Firefly, rather.
I don't believe so, no. No, all the Bonanzas and Gunsmokes came around and High Chaparrals and Virginians, and there was no time for space people anymore.
Strike all these sets! No more space! Everyone hates space! Now what we want to do is romanticize the Old West, where men were men.
I mean, it's fascinating to me that they all sort of collapsed in basically the same year.
Yeah.
That's just really specific feeling. But that happens sometimes, right? We all remember when grunge started becoming big and hair metal was basically gone.
Sure, and everybody hated all other forms of music, and they all died out.
Kind of. A lot of bands died because of Nirvana. So we're not going to go full familiar faces on this one, but I figure it's worth mentioning that beloved Winky, as I said earlier, was perhaps best known for a role he played when he was quite young, as one of the members of the Little Rascals, a.k.a. Our Gang.
I have to ask you, Chris, I know you find Winky to be, like, attractive. Did you think he was a cute kid when he was in Our Gang?
I mean, yes, I guess. Like, he's a cute kid in that, like, he is clearly marketable as a cute kid. You could slap a painting of that kid on a jar of Gerber's.
He could be in a Norman Rockwell painting.
Exactly.
Cute kid.
So much cheek.
Yes. That is what makes a kid cute, isn't it? Like the super big puffy cheeks.
Well, he had the big puffy cheeks. He had the wet doughy eyes.
Yeah.
He had really sort of defined eyebrows. I don't know. Yeah, he was well cast for that role, I guess.
Yeah. Looked good in a little jaunty cap. Not everyone does, you know? I don't.
Yeah. Did you watch a lot of Our Gang shorts?
So I remember Our Gang being on sometimes, like during the Saturday morning cartoons, but not a lot. You know, like it seems like even in the 80s, they were kind of phasing that out. Can't imagine why. But it is certainly the case. Like when I was a kid, I knew who Alfalfa was, right? Like I knew who Buckwheat was. I knew who Spanky was. I totally knew the dog with the circle around one eye. I mean, when Spuds McKenzie came out as the mascot for like Budweiser, it was like, oh, they are totally ripping off the Our Gang dog.
Right, exactly.
So like visually and in terms of the characters, like they were really still showing up in the media that I consumed, but I don't remember watching very much Our Gang.
I had a similar relationship to them. It was on. I'm pretty sure I watched some of it. I don't really remember it. I guess just to clarify for listeners who maybe don't know this much about them, Our Gang was a series of shorts that were made from 1922 to 1944, so 22 years, both silent and then in sound. And obviously, no child stays a child actor for 22 years, so it was one of those franchises where they kept cycling kids out of it and bringing in new kids to do it. And so Scotty Beckett, Winky, was there for about 2 years in 1934 to 1935. But yeah, it's a bunch of kids and they're doing their little cute kid hijinks.
They're sassy, cute kids, but they also like have weird adultisms. And yeah, when I was looking that up, I was also just like, oh my gosh, how young was the youngest kid who was on Our Gang? And there was somebody who started when they were 3 years old.
Amazing.
And it's like, okay, I remember my kid when he was 3. He was adorable, don't get me wrong, but I can't imagine having any sort of control over him from a directorial point of view or having lines to say.
Yeah.
So that must be why so much of what the kids do inside of these episodes is like crawl in through a window and walk over to the desk and mess things up, or, like they sit on the side of the sidewalk with their face in their hand, like hump, hump. Like there's so much like short clips of the kids emoting and expressing, but not a whole lot of let's have dialogue expressing something.
Exactly. I think if you're going to watch Our Gang now, one of the things that you can do is appreciate how it was filmed in order to get the most out of these kid actors and their limited capabilities, as you were just describing. The other thing that you can watch it for is to enjoy the racial and sexual politics of the era.
Holy criminies! Wow!
Now, on the one hand, totally broke ground by having black and white kids playing together and hanging out.
Sure.
On the other hand, occasionally made jokes that, I would not make that joke. No, thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. One of the ones that both you and I think, watched was Sprucing Up, where in the beginning of the episode, the kids are all like, Mom, I'm not going to shine my shoes. I'm not going to comb my hair. Like, I am not going to wash behind my ears. I'm going to fake it and get out of the house. And then, cute girl moves in and everybody has to clean up. But there's a moment when they're all looking at each other, talking about like cleaning up. And it's just like, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well for talking to the black actor. And it's like, it doesn't. It's just like, wow, that would not come up today. And there's the jokes that they make with the ladies as well. Like there's so many girl hating jokes and like, we can't be friends with girls. Girls are only for breaking male friendships up. Like that's all they exist for.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a difficult watch nowadays.
Yeah. But, like the kids want to not go to school. They want to go to the circus. They really like their teacher, so they don't want their teacher to get married because back then, if a teacher got married, she wasn't a teacher anymore. She became a housewife. So you had to get a new teacher, right? So like if they like their teacher, they have to make her promise never to get married.
Yeah.
Or to, disturbingly, wait until they grow up so that they can marry her. Ew, 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 ew. Sorry. That was one of the super fun ones. Oh, also, can I just say in the Sprucing Up one, Alfalfa taking a big handful of lard.
Oh, yes.
And using lard to style his hair. It was so gross.
So, do you know about the Our Gang curse?
Oh, I don't know if I want to know about the Our Gang curse. I like to think that these kids went on to live happy lives. They did not, huh?
Well, many of them did not, and that has led to a bit of a notion of an Our Gang curse that every kid who was on in Our Gang had a terrible tragic end when they were quite young. This is not true at all if you actually look at sort of all of the people who were in it, but there were a lot of kids involved, and therefore there are some statistical outliers. And one of those statistical outliers is Winky.
Oh, that makes me sad. I mean, look, Winky had a young adult role. He wasn't, child actor done. He got to have more roles in Hollywood.
Well, here's the thing. He got fired from Rocky Jones, Space Ranger.
What?
I'm reading from the Wikipedia now. He was fired from the series after being arrested on a concealed weapons charge and for passing a bad check.
Oh.
He also drank a lot. He also
Oh.
gambled a lot and didn't pay his gambling debts. And that was sort of the end of his TV career, more or less. A little while later, he left and went into real estate and a few other attempts at making some money. He got arrested several times for drunk driving and drug possession and stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems like those demons that kept him from being an actor, if you don't deal with those, like they're going to ruin whatever livelihood you try to have.
Yeah. And he died when he was 38 years old. It's unclear exactly what happened, but yeah, it might have been an overdose. It's a sad story.
That's rough. I mean, because I didn't have a big old crush on Winky like you did watching this episode, but he's like a jaunty fellow. He's lots of fun. Like,
Yeah.
I don't hate his song, It's a good song.
It's a good
and
song.
he seems like fun. And it's sad to think that his personal life wasn't as awesome.
Yeah.
They did do a Little Rascals movie in the 90s as well.
They did try to bring it back, which seems like a real bad idea. Even if you're trying to put on an early 90s like spin of like the, United Colors of Benetton type approach to it.
They had pretty much the same characters as they did the first time around. They did a reunion of all of them to make a Where Are They 20 years later or 25 years later. And like most of them had short-lived acting careers after that. And when I was reading through the article about their reunion, like 90% of the people who played it now live in Texas.
Oh.
It seems like a strange way for their lives to end up that they were randomly in this Little Rascals movie together and then separately all moved to Texas.
All right. Well, we have talked a bit about Rocky Jones and General Hospital and Manhunts in Space, but do we have anything else we want to add before we wrap things up?
There was one thing I wanted to talk about, Chris, which has to do with Tom being diagnosed with colorblindness by Joel and Crow.
An awkward scene. I think I even found it awkward back in the day.
Yeah, it's true. I agree. But there is the sense that, like, okay, they've been watching all of these movies. Some of them are in black and white. Some of them are in color. Joel's talking about black and white movies and how he responds to them. And Crow's talking about how he prefers color. And Tom's response is, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, they're different. They're just, I don't understand. And then Joel is like, what color is this? What color is this? What color is this? And of course, all Tom sees is red. And until they had this conversation about there being that marked difference between some films, Tom ostensibly didn't know. And I had a student have a very similar experience with discovering their colorblindness.
Oh, okay.
So this kid, he comes into my class. I have him for statistics. And the period before he had me, he had a science class. And the lesson that they were doing in science class was about colorblindness. So the science teacher was putting up the circles that have all the different colored dots inside of them, but most of the dots are the same kind of color range. And then it has a number in the middle. And, the thing up on the screen and the teacher says, all of us are seeing the number 7. But if you were colorblind, you'd be seeing the number 23 right now. And this kid is like, I'm seeing 23.
Oh, no.
And then, the teacher puts up another one and it's just like, oh, and if you had this kind of color blindness, of course, you'd be seeing this number instead. And my student is like, holy crap. I'm not seeing the right numbers that everyone else is seeing. And he had to reveal this in front of all of his classmates and his teacher. He had lived his whole life into his teens not knowing that he was colorblind. He comes into statistics and he's like, Ms. Wells, I just learned I'm colorblind. And he was just like, I don't even know what to do with this information.
Oh, exactly.
And I'm like, yeah, so has it changed your life at all? And it's like, well, no, but it's really, I had no idea that everyone was seeing colors around them differently than I was. So it was an interesting thing for this poor kid, but like that moment in science class of, I don't see the 7.
It's striking to me that it wasn't until high school that happened, because I remember encountering those way younger when they talked about colorblindness as a kid.
And I feel like when I took my kid to see his doctor, that they're, over the course of his child visits, they tested for those sorts of things, right? Like they tested his vision, they tested his hearing, they did the what number do you see? And I don't know why. What do you change about somebody's life if they're colorblind, right? If they have a red-green deficiency or whatever it is, like nothing. What are you going to do differently with your life if that's the case? Maybe you're not going to become a graphic designer. I don't know.
Although you still can.
Yeah.
One of my favorite YouTube channels is a show called The Drawfee Show, in which they make dumb drawings with ridiculous prompts and so forth. And one of the 4 artists on the show is red-green colorblind.
Do they talk about how it affects their work?
Yeah. Well, he'll often talk about how, he had to think really hard and double check with his partner about, is this the right color? Or, pick colors from a pre-existing image. If you're imitating, I don't know, a drawing of Goofy or something, that you pick the colors from there to make sure that you don't get it wrong, which is a little bit cheating, but it's also fine. It does come up and it is interesting. I've known other artists who are colorblind, and there's ways around it. You can deal with it. It is a little frustrating on MST3K because they sort of did this for a bit at the beginning of this episode. And I think they had already had Tom making jokes about being able to see colors, and they would continue to forget about this thing about Tom immediately. Like it was an 80s sitcom, and fine. But
yeah,
it was a weird bit for that reason. If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've ever had adventures in space or in the hospital, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And this show is made possible by listeners just like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Gene. Thank you, Gene. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Gene and help us research and record this show, and you can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to our superfan bonus bits, and you can find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that we mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/143.
Chris, I know that this is a serial and we're going to continue manhunting in space and general hospitaling. But is that what we're doing next time?
It is what we're doing next time.
Yay!
We will be rejoining Rocky and Winky and all our friends in Season 4, Episode 17, Crash of the Moons.
Wait, no General Hospital?
Oh, that's a General Hospital as well. Yeah, we'll be rejoining. I forget who's in this episode of General Hospital, but I assume we'll be seeing some of our friends from the hospital from Port Charles, is it? I forget.
I don't know, but I need to know what happens between Jesse and Dr. Phil and how that meeting with the engaged couple goes, because the tension is real.
I cannot remember what happens in the other General Hospital episodes that they do. I don't remember them having a follow-through, but I cannot remember. The plots of those did not stick to me ever.
Fair enough.
But I'm looking forward to seeing if watching them with the General Hospital wiki in hand like I did this time helps make the plots a little clearer to me next time. But until then,
I will now perform a modern dance to express my true feelings.
Now let me relax with a little black book and a little gay nightlife. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Isn't that interesting?